There was a man unlike any other in Israel, a man born with destiny braided into his very being, a living prophecy walking the dust of Zorah. From the moment of his conception, a divine vow hung over him, a promise to God, whispered by an angel to a barren woman in the hills of Dan. His hair would never know the touch of a razor. His life would be consecrated, set apart as holy unto the Lord. His strength, a visible sign, a burning flame of God's Spirit resting upon him. His name was Samson, and his story would echo through the ages as both a stark warning and a profound testimony of divine purpose working through fractured humanity. In those dark days when Israel had no king, when the tribes were scattered like sheep without a shepherd, each man did what was right in his own eyes. The land groaned under the iron fist of Philistine oppression. For 40 years, the people lived in fear, their fields plundered, their villages burned, their spirits crushed beneath the weight of foreign rule. The Philistines, with their iron chariots and seafaring might, held God's people in bondage, mocking their God and desecrating their land. Into this world of shadows and despair, Samson was born, not to live quietly in the shadows, but to rise as a force of deliverance, a judge appointed by God to begin the breaking of the yoke. From the earliest stirrings of his youth, there was something unearthly about him. As a boy growing up in the fields between Zorah and Eshtal, strength coursed through his veins and muscles in ways no one could explain. It wasn't merely the prowess of a well-developed frame. It was supernatural, a tangible presence of the Spirit of the Lord moving upon him. He tore through a young lion with his bare hands as easily as a man might tear a kid goat, later finding honey swarming in its carcass, a strange sign of both judgment and provision. He wielded the jawbone of a donkey as though it were a sword forged of celestial iron, striking down 1,000 Philistine warriors in a single, divinely empowered frenzy. So great was the slaughter that the place was named Ramath-Lehi, Jawbone Hill. He ripped the massive, fortified city gates of Gaza from their stone foundations and hinges, hoisting them upon his shoulders, carrying them to the top of a hill overlooking Hebron. A staggering feat of strength meant as a blatant, mocking challenge to his enemies. The Philistines feared him, whispered his name in the night with superstitious dread, for he was a living tempest, a storm wrapped in flesh, an unstoppable force they could not comprehend or control. Yet Samson's formidable strength was matched only by his profound, tragic weakness. For though he was mighty in battle, invincible in physical confrontation, he was frail and vulnerable in the realm of desire. His heart wandered where it should not, perpetually tangled in the thickets of lust and longing. He was consecrated to God from the womb, a Nazirite set apart, yet he was fascinated with the forbidden, drawn like a moth to the flame of foreign women and pagan ways. The Philistines quickly realized they could not conquer him with armies or overcome him with force. Their spears shattered against his might, their chariots were useless against his fury. So they sought another weapon, one far more subtle and insidious: seduction. And into his tumultuous life stepped the woman whose name would be forever bound to his downfall, synonymous with betrayal and the cost of broken vows, Delilah. She was beautiful, yes, captivating in the way that turns heads and stops hearts, but she was far more than merely beautiful. She was dangerous, a walking snare clothed in allure. She carried mystery in her dark eyes, the kind that draws a man close even as it hides daggers behind the veil of charm. To Samson, she was a flame in the darkness, irresistible and consuming, a passion he could not deny, a desire that overrode reason and consecration. To the Philistine lords, the rulers of the 5 cities who trembled at Samson's name, she was the perfect instrument, the ultimate weapon. They approached her not with swords, but with whispers and promises of silver, their voices dripping with conspiracy and greed. "Entice him," they urged, their words like poison honey. "Discover the secret of his great strength and how we might overpower him, subdue him, bind him. Each of us will pay you 1,100 shekels of silver." A fortune, enough to make a queen wealthy, offered for the secret of the strongest man's ruin. Delilah agreed. Whether it was the glittering promise of wealth that moved her, or a fierce loyalty to her Philistine people and their gods, or simply the cold, calculating ambition of a woman who saw her chance for power and significance in the shadow of a giant? We do not know. The text is silent on her inner motives, leaving her as an enigma, a vessel of betrayal. But she set herself to the task with relentless determination, weaving a web of deceit, flattery, and emotional manipulation around the strongest man in Israel, a web he seemed all too willing to step into. Night after night, in the dim lamplight of her chamber in the valley of Sorek, she pressed him with words as soft as silk yet sharp as thorns. Her voice was a caress and a trap all at once. "Tell me, Samson," she would murmur, her fingers tracing the powerful lines of his arm, her eyes holding his. "Tell me the secret of your strength. Tell me how you might be bound and subdued." She played on his affection, his pride, his desire to please her. Samson, cunning in his own way, perhaps amused by her persistence or underestimating her resolve, toyed with her. He saw her as a conquest, a diversion, not recognizing the viper coiled in his embrace. "If they bind me with 7 fresh bowstrings," he said, his voice confident, perhaps laughing inwardly, "that have not been dried, then I shall become weak like any other man." She listened, her eyes soft with feigned understanding, her smile tender and inviting, but her heart was cold with calculation. When he slept, exhausted by passion or drink, she moved silently. She bound him tightly with the fresh, green bowstrings, strong and supple. Then, from the shadows where the Philistine lords had hidden their men, she cried out, her voice sharp and urgent, cutting through the night. "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." He awoke instantly, the spirit of the Lord stirring within him, and the bowstrings snapped like threads touched by a sudden, intense flame, falling away uselessly. The men hiding in the shadows fled in terror, their ambush undone, leaving Delilah alone with the man whose strength defied her first attempt. Delilah laughed, perhaps lightly, perhaps with a hint of scorn that he thought her so easily fooled. But she pressed again, her voice turning petulant, accusatory. "You have mocked me, Samson," she complained, perhaps turning away from him. "You have lied to me. Tell me truly, how may you be bound?" She played the wounded lover, the woman scorned by his secrecy. Again he played the game, enjoying the cat and mouse, confident in his invincibility. "If they bind me with new ropes," he offered, "that have never been used, ropes still smelling of the loom, then I shall be weak." And again, while he slept in a false sense of security, she tested him, binding him tightly with the unused ropes. Again, the cry echoed in the night, "The Philistines are upon you." And again he awoke, the divine power surging through him, and he broke the ropes as though they were spider webs, snapping them effortlessly. The hidden attackers fled once more, frustrated and fearful. A third time she coaxed and pleaded, her voice now a mixture of desperation and manipulation. "Tell me the truth, Samson," she begged, perhaps weeping real tears or feigning them masterfully. "How may you be subdued? You do not love me if you keep this secret." She twisted his affection, making her demand a test of his love. He relented, giving her another half-truth, another layer to the deception. "If you weave the 7 locks of my hair," he told her, touching the uncut symbol of his vow, "into the fabric of a loom and fasten it tightly with the pin, then I will lose my strength." She did as he said, weaving his hair into the loom's web, tightening it, securing it with the pin. Once more the ambush was sprung. Her cry pierced the night. "The Philistines are upon you." But Samson rose, tearing away the entire loom, fabric, pin, and all, his strength unbroken, the symbol of his vow intact. The Philistines retreated again, baffled and enraged. 3 times she had tested him. 3 times he had escaped, his power seemingly absolute, his secret still safe. But Delilah was relentless. Her persistence was like water against stone, wearing him down day after day, night after night. She would not let go. She wept incessantly, accused him bitterly of not loving her, of keeping secrets from her heart, of mocking her with his lies. Her words pressed on him like a relentless weight, a constant drip of emotional torture. "How can you say you love me?" she wailed, "when your heart is closed to me? You have made a fool of me 3 times. You have not told me the secret of your strength." Her voice became a grating accusation, a constant drone in his ears until his soul was vexed to death. He could bear it no longer. The constant pressure, the emotional blackmail, the sheer exhaustion of her nagging, combined with his own lack of spiritual discernment and his overwhelming desire for her, broke him. In the weakness of that moment, blinded by passion and worn down by her relentless assault, Samson spoke the truth, the sacred secret he had guarded his whole life. "No razor has ever touched my head," he confessed, his voice heavy with resignation, perhaps with a sense of finality. "For I have been a Nazirite to God from my mother's womb. If my head is shaved, if I am defiled in this vow, my strength will leave me, and I shall become weak like any other man." He laid bare the source of his power, the condition of his consecration, the very core of his identity before God. Delilah knew with a chilling certainty that sent a thrill through her that this time he had told her all his heart. This was no ruse, no half-truth. This was the key. She sent immediate word to the Philistine lords, her message swift and sure. "Come up once more," she whispered, her voice tight with anticipation. "For he has revealed to me his secret. This time he has told me everything." And they came, bringing the silver with them, the price of betrayal clinking in their pouches, ready to claim their prize. That night, the air thick with destiny and deceit, she lulled him to sleep upon her lap, perhaps singing softly, perhaps stroking his hair, the very symbol of his strength. A servant, silent and efficient, came with a razor in hand, and the locks that had grown uncut since his birth, the visible sign of his lifelong vow to God, fell silently to the ground, one by one. His strength departed, not merely because of the hair itself, but because his covenant with God had been willfully broken. The symbol was gone, and with it, the reality it represented, the empowering presence of the Spirit of the Lord. When she cried out once more, her voice triumphant this time, "The Philistines are upon you." Samson awoke, expecting the familiar rush of power, the divine surge that had never failed him. He stirred, ready to snap his bonds as before, but this time it was gone, utterly, completely gone. He did not know that the Spirit of the Lord had departed from him. He rose to fight and found himself helpless, weak, a mere man. The Philistines seized him instantly, their shouts of victory echoing in the chamber. They gouged out his eyes with brutal efficiency, plunging him into literal darkness, a horrifying parallel to his spiritual blindness. They bound him with bronze shackles, heavy and humiliating. The man who once struck terror into armies, who carried city gates on his shoulders, was led away in chains, sightless, broken, reduced to grinding grain in a prison mill like an animal. The mighty had become the mocked, the conqueror now the captive, a spectacle of fallen greatness. The Philistines celebrated, believing their god Dagon had triumphed over the God of Israel. Yet even in this pit of despair, grinding grain in darkness, the story was not finished. For as Samson toiled, blind and broken, something began to stir. His hair, once shorn in betrayal, began to grow again. And with it, the mercy of God began to kindle, a faint spark in the deepest darkness. The outward symbol of the vow was returning, and perhaps, in the silence and humiliation of the prison, Samson's heart was turning back to the God he had forsaken. One day, the Philistines gathered in the temple of their god Dagon to celebrate their great victory over Samson. It was a massive festival, a sacrifice of praise to their idol. 3,000 men and women filled the vast temple, crowded onto the roof and packed inside, mocking Samson, praising Dagon for delivering their mighty enemy into their hands. They brought the blind Hebrew out of his prison to entertain them, to laugh at the fallen giant, to make sport of his weakness. Blind, humiliated, and surrounded by his gloating enemies, Samson asked the servant who guided him, "Place my hands upon the pillars that support this temple, that I may lean against them and rest." The servant complied, leading him to the two central pillars that held up the entire structure. Samson placed his hands on the massive stone pillars, one with his right hand, the other with his left. And he prayed not with the arrogant confidence of his youth, but with broken, desperate humility, reaching out to the God he had betrayed. "O Lord God," he cried out, his voice raw with emotion, "remember me, I pray. Strengthen me just this once, O God, that I may with this one blow avenge myself on the Philistines for my 2 eyes." It was a prayer for vengeance, yes, but also a cry for restoration, a final act of faith in the God who had called him. And God heard. The Spirit of the Lord who had departed returned in a final, overwhelming surge of power. With every ounce of might, with the strength of his entire being focused in that single moment, Samson pushed. The massive stone pillars trembled. The roof groaned under the weight of the revelers. In a final, cataclysmic surge of divine strength, the temple collapsed in upon itself with a deafening roar. The lords of the Philistines, the mockers, the worshippers of Dagon, all were crushed beneath the tons of falling stone and rubble. In his death, Samson struck down more Philistines than he had in all his life. He died a hero, a judge, a deliverer, fulfilling the purpose for which he was born, even in the midst of his tragic failure. And so the man who was set apart from the womb, who burned with divine passion yet fell so easily to human weakness, who was betrayed by twisted love and blinded by his own sin, ended his days as both a solemn warning and a powerful testimony. A warning of how unchecked desire can enslave even the strongest of men, how consecration can be shattered by compromise, how the gifts of God can be forfeited through disobedience. A testimony that even in the depths of failure, in the darkness of blindness and chains, God's mercy is not exhausted, his purposes are not thwarted, and he can still work redemption through the most broken of vessels. He gives second chances, even when they come at the end. For the true strength of Samson was never in his uncut hair, nor in his rippling muscles, nor in the terror he inspired in his enemies. It was in the Spirit of the Lord that rested upon him. And when that Spirit returned, even for a single final moment, the blind man saw more clearly than ever before. He saw the justice of God. He saw the fulfillment of his calling. He saw the power of a God who uses the foolish things of the world to shame the wise, the weak things to shame the strong. The story of Samson and Delilah is a story of intrigue and betrayal, of love twisted into a deadly snare, of strength undone by fatal weakness. But beyond the human drama, beyond the tragedy and the triumph, it is ultimately the story of a God who remains faithful, who uses flawed instruments to accomplish his sovereign will, who gives strength to the weary, sight to the blind, and redemption to the fallen. It is the story of a God whose purposes stand, even when his people fall. A blessing for you. May the Lord bless you and keep you in the hollow of his hand. May his face shine upon you, illuminating your path with his grace, and may he be gracious to you in every circumstance. May he turn his face towards you, giving you a peace that passes all understanding, a peace the world cannot give or take away. As you journey through your own valleys and mountaintops, may you remember the God of Samson, the God who sees potential in our weakness, who offers mercy after our failure, and whose strength is made perfect in our humility. May you guard the consecration he has placed upon your life, resisting the snares that seek to ensnare you, and may you walk in the power of his Spirit, not your own strength. And when you stumble, may you know the profound truth that his mercy is new every morning, his compassions never fail, and he is able to restore you and use you for his glory, just as he did for Samson in that final, powerful moment. May you dwell in the house of the Lord forever, secure in his everlasting love. Amen. Join OUR flock. If this journey through Samson's life, his triumphs, his failures, and his ultimate redemption has spoken to your heart, we invite you to become part of our growing flock by subscribing to this channel. Hit that subscribe button and tap the notification bell so you never miss an opportunity to explore the depths of God's Word and the richness of his stories with us. If this message blessed you, please give it a like. It helps others find this content. And most importantly, leave a comment below sharing your reflections on Samson's story or how God has shown his strength in your weakness. As you engage with this community of faith, may you receive God's abundant blessings poured out upon you, filling your cup to overflowing with his grace, strength, and unending love. Remember, the same God who gave Samson strength in his final hour is your God today. Walk in that truth, rest in his faithfulness, and know that He is always working for your good and His glory.